education with livelihood rather than a mere degree. I was very fondly listening to what Mr. Multani said, that we have so many degree holders across the world. Rather, I would say we have the maximum number in the world. But is that something to feel flattered about? About 4 years back, I was sitting with the Vice Chancellor of the Cambridge University because he happens to be a teacher of microbiology. He's a medico. He's an octogenarian, past 80. In UK, teachers don't retire. They carry on as long as. So also the attorneys. I think that is one improvisation which might happen in this policy as we move on. The initiation has been done. So being a medico, wherever he's in India, he calls for me. In the course of conversation, he said, "Doc, I must tell you, if I didn't have students from India, my university would be closed." And then he went on to explain all my PhDs from India. So was Mr. Multani taking pride over it. So when he went out, I was sitting with another colleague of mine. I said, "What was this?" That the gentleman said, "What's a compliment or otherwise?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "The British gentleman does not understand that a British boy or a girl will go in for PhD only if he or she has decided to put in the rest of the life into that. And to arrive to some logical conclusion, if not, then to leave a legacy for the next generation of researchers or workers to follow. Here, an Indian goes to get a PhD as a trophy. And I have ample number of examples I can tell you in privacy among my own contemporaries. They have done a degree, a doctorate in biotechnology and come back to become MD in a computer company. And no problem about it. It's a win-win situation. The proprietor of the company during the morning walk takes pleasure in telling his fellow workers, "आपको पता है, मैंने Cambridge का PhD रख लिया अपना manager." And manager is happy as long as spouse is happy that he's getting a fat pay packet. So such a huge mismatch. I hope this education policy which I could share to you also, if you don't know, that I have been myself a teacher for more than a quarter of a century, a teacher of medicine. And therefore, I justified that to myself without being able to make out what had struck the organizer's mind. Now, as far as the national or the new education policy, which is actually the National Education Policy 2020, NEP 2020, where the student society have learned to be specific to the subject and just talking about that. I think in a brief, if you ask me, India had been actually waiting for long for this revisit of the education policy to happen. And to that extent, we owe it to the conviction and the courage of Hon'ble Prime Minister that he took up this initiative. Broadly speaking, this NEP 2020 seeks to address issues at 4 levels. A, rectify many of those anomalies which had existed over the past, which through this policy are being sought to be rectified, if not wholly, at least to a very large extent, and that will pave the way for further rectification if required. The simplest example is the nomenclature itself. We called it HRD. I have been associated with the private sector and been on the advisory of many MNCs. HRD means management. In government circles, this is DOPT. In states, this is GAD. There's something to do with administration management. Is far from what is education dealing with. And in fact, at the time of independence, the ministry itself was known as education. And this nomenclature, which is quite confusing, I know what had prompted this change, which took place somewhere in 1980s, has been rectified. Second, to reorient India's education system to the global benchmarks. Sudhanshuji was referring to India's capacity to have the maximum literacy rate in the world, which has been part of legacy, as he cited beautifully. And therefore, if we have to again reach that, we have to live up to those benchmarks, because if India in the year was living up to that standards, it was also actually living up to the universal standards that were expected of it. Third, to link, correct that. And the fourth level is the quality control, which somewhere midway we had possibly inadvertently lost track of giving due attention. When we talk of so many thousand PhDs, actually what happened at the time of independence, the immediate concern was the accessibility of education. We cannot have any policy consistently prevalent for all times to come, and that applies equally well to every stream of work or every stream of planning. In 1947, you just had 5 or 6 universities. In the pre-independence era, you had Calcutta University, you had Patna, then Madras, of course, was there because the Britishers came that way, as Trivedi was beautifully mentioned. They landed at the East Coast, set up Calcutta Residency College, Calcutta University, and the first medical college of India, which is now known as Poli. Then they travelled southwards, set up Madras University, Madras Medical College, and Madras University. So even JNU and other things came much later, because they came to North much later. And the major university catering to all these 4 or 5 present states was the Punjab University, with the headquarters in Lahore. And only privileged few had the opportunity to go for a graduation. Even in a place like Delhi, some of the earlier generation graduates were from Lahore, whether it was Mr. Khushwant Singh, Mr. Valraj Sani, whoever. In fact, when Atalji went to Lahore, one of the reasons he took Devanand along with him was that he was also an alumni of Government College Lahore. So the immediate concern, and I don't write that rightly so, to make it accessible so that those who could get education and could also have the capability of education would not be deprived. So somewhere in 1955, in the second plan, you had this stream of regional engineering colleges, which is now known as NITs. Then you had these 5 IITs. Now, of course, that is diluted. So that was accessibility, which was degree colleges not available. But then somewhere the consideration of having new institutions was not purely based on merit. I'm not going to the extraneous factors, because even my community may be responsible for that, for whatever consideration. So we had a mushrooming of institutions with not enough of attention to the quality control of it. And that is, I think, these 4 aspects are what the NEP 2020 seeks to address. May not be to the conclusion immediately, but it paves the way for that. And as I said, delinking with degree, it also seeks to give weightage to aptitudes, to skill, to your inherent talents, because that was the casualty. When you were a topper in IIT and ended up becoming a babu as a civil servant. If you do a survey of the civil service, every batch has almost 70% who are the toppers from the IITians. So what is the pride of having that IIT degree? So I think we somehow lost the track of the fundamentals and got carried away by the ornamentation. And thanks to Prime Minister, he brought back to focus during his Independence Day address in 2015. He said, "Start-up India, stand-up India." And I know the same day many people were asking me, what does it mean? It was such an alien. And the result of this is that before 2014, before this government came in, India had just about 350 startups. Today we have more than 75,000 and more than 100 unicorns. And India's startup ecosystem ranks 3rd in the world. And even in a sector like biotechnology, which was hardly known, we had just 50 startups before 2014. Today we have more than 5,000. When we talk of Amrit Kal, we forget that what are the new sectors which are going to add value to this Amrit Kal. How is India going to become a world economy? It's going to become on the strength of those sectors and those resources which remain unexplored. One of them is the biotechnology. We have a huge biodiversity source. We have a huge agriculture sector. We don't talk of that because when we talk of startups, we talk of IT. That is fixed in our mind. But there's something called agri-tech startup. And that is exclusive to India. And the bioeconomy of India before 2014 was just about $10 billion. Today is $80 billion. And the projections indicate that it will be $150 billion by 2025. That is the kind of push given by this government headed by Prime Minister Modi. And as I said, for the next 25 years, we have to look at these sectors which are not looked at. Ocean. We have 7,500 long kilometer coastal area, longer than ocean neighbor. Why so? वो प्राचीन काल की बात बता रहे थे सुधांशु, शायद उसी दौर में जबकि वो बात कर रहे थे, हमारे बुजुर्गों ने यहाँ कहीं उनको ये अनुमान हुआ होगा कि इसके अंदर कितने हीरे जवाहरात. The future economy, the minerals, the mines, the living and non-living resources under the seabed are the huge, the largest in India, which have remained totally, it's now only, again, you heard, Prime Minister said Deep Ocean Mission and made it a flagship program. So these are the new areas to which this direction will give. And when we talk of science, technology, of course, our entire education system and technology is virtually entered in the Indian household. So what is it? It is science plus technology enriched by innovation. That is what makes the composition or recipe of a startup. And innovation is a constant process. And for innovation, you need to have creativity. And for creativity, you need to have mentoring of your inherent talents, which sometimes got messed up in the earlier policy that we were following. As Francis Bacon once read, the greatest harm to the cause of literature is done by the teachers of English literature, when they expect their students to mug up lines from Shakespeare in dingy, dark classrooms and repeat them. So if you are not able to, and that's why we have actually initiated a program in our ministry, which I thought was important, to catch them young at the time of 10, 12. Because after class 12, the first culprit is the parent. In the morning walk, वो कहता है कि मैंने आदर्श में डाल दिया, आपने कहाँ डाला? And वो परेशानी बन गई. And I see so many, parents asking for a hostel accommodation. Admission तो हो गया, hostel नहीं मिला. But if you do, I said you do a survey, we did that. If you do it for the last 10 years, most of those who have made it from the civil services are from the Navodaya Vidyalaya, from the Kendriya Vidyalaya. Hardly few of them from these high profile. And that's because you are not actually allowing the child to grow by its aptitude. You are not also, because the child sometimes may not be aware of what he actually is meant for. And that's where a mentorship is required. So we have introduced a mentorship program. We've identified a couple of colleges. I hope to do more of them. A mentor is the one who has to identify what is it, because the parents would not do. Parents would some translators, particularly for the science stream. About 6 years back, there was a protest going on by the civil services candidates who had not waited. Early, to begin with, I didn't take it seriously because every year after the result is over, those who don't make it sit on protest. There's a permanent tent outside UPSC office. The person doesn't even charge money. वो कहता कोई नहीं बैठना, जिसने बैठा हो किसी को दे देंगे. So I didn't take it. ऐसे मैंने कहा यार ये हर साल होता है, जो फेल हो गए वो हड़ताल पर रहते, 2-4 दिन हमारा पुतला भी जला लेते हैं, फिर चले जाते हैं. But then somebody said, no, I want to, and the third person said, there's a point that I want to bring to your notice. He said, what? He said, they are saying that the translation, I myself went through that. The translation into Hindi of the steel plant was लोहे का पौधा. तो ट्रांसलेशन करने वाले ने बड़ी ईमानदारी से ट्रांसलेट किया था. लोहा भी है और पौधा भी है. लेकिन that goes to the disadvantage of the candidate. So for that we need to have, I'm glad some of the states like Madhya Pradesh have already introduced Hindi medium in some of the engineering colleges. So that is one challenge that we will face when we talk of vernaculars. Otherwise, talent is equally accomplishable. About a few years back, we had a fourth topper who had done his entire graduation in Telugu. So I asked him why so. He said, because I knew graduation was the minimum qualification for civil services. I didn't have access to that. I come from a village. My mother is a housemaid. I had to walk a considerable distance to reach a small township where there was college, and it was only Telugu medium. So the urge is also there. Only thing, the providers, we have to. And that too, when we talk of Amrit Kal, these is the section of population, those in their 30s, in their 20s, who are going to put in active energy for the next 25 years before India turns 100. And so what is our role? Our role is to provide capacity, to provide that kind of milieu, so that when these youngsters today reach 2047 and they have the privilege of being known as the architects of Century India, architects for 2047, we might have the satisfaction of having done justice to their capacity building. If that is achieved, I think, if not wholly, even if you are moving in that direction, that would be the success of the NEP 2020. Thank you. Next.
Thank you very much, sir, with your motivating speech. And